So same deal Tuesday as always. You can come or not come, but you'll need to Zoom in if you don't come physically, or you'll need to listen to the recording, and I'll try to put it up that day. And then we go to Thanksgiving, and we have one more week of classes, but we will not have any face-to-face component the week after Thanksgiving. It will all be Zoom. And so we will be meeting via Zoom after Thanksgiving. I think that's the week of the 30th. So I think our class is December 1st maybe, and 3rd. So I'll send Zoom invitations to you. Nobody should come back after Thanksgiving. And I will record it too. And then we have finals week. I think your last written assignment, in addition to the forums, is something that's due December 6th. It's on your Moodle page. Feel free to do it early if you want to. It is, I've gone blank, but it's on the Moodle page. It has something to do with media effects, I believe. And it's the very last kind of 25-point assignment. Also, do not forget to do the forums. So all of you should have your forum grades from 1 to 15, and 16 through 20. Keep up with those, because December 6th, I'm going to stop and grade those. I want you to know that grade going into the final. I might actually try to grade those a little sooner, so I may shoot you an email saying you'll get these done. And I have not graded your PR campaigns yet, but it's the next thing on my list. And so I hope by Monday you have that grade. So we're getting really, really close. You've got one more written assignment that if you want to, you can do early. It's on the Moodle page and the forums, and one last test. So anybody have any questions about where we stand? We are winding down. Let me see, I think somebody else logged on. No, it looks like somebody got.
Yep, that was me.
Hey, Colin, how you doing? I just want to make sure you're listed here. Sometimes it's quite an effort to get online. Sometimes you get kicked off and things like that. So glad you're here.
Yeah, Moodle wasn't working whatsoever, so I just went through the Zoom app itself.
Tanner? Luke? I'm sorry, Luke. Sorry. That's okay. Glad you're here, Luke. Luke, your last name? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to check to see anybody else. Okay, now I'm going to put them down to.
Did you get me down?
Did Anna say that?
Yes.
I got Anna. I got Morgan, Nathan, Paige, JoJo, Kara, Gracie, Anna, Nathaniel, Colin, Luke, and Emily just walked in. So I think I've got everybody. Anybody at home not hear me call your name? Okay, I think I got you. So we're going to talk about ethics today. We did watch some videos and get a start on this topic, but now we're going to talk a little bit about what the book says on ethics. It's funny, it worked before class, set it down, now it doesn't work. Okay. Sometimes you gotta get it going one. Okay, now it's gonna work on me. Okay. I'm not gonna read all these to you. They're in the textbook, but there are a few objectives of this chapter I think are really important. One is to understand sort of the current issues involved in media ethics. What are some of the things ethically that media personnel deal with today? One of the things your book talks quite a bit about is your duty as a media profession. You have several duties. You have a duty to yourself, you have a duty to your readers, you have a duty to your profession, and we've got some slides on that. But that's kind of an interesting concept to me, that your ethics should be driven by your duties. Your audience has certain expectations of you. And so that's an interesting thing to think about too. If you work for a print publication, your readers have expectations of you. If you work for a broadcast outlet, your viewers, that kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of philosophies in this chapter about ethics. There's a difference between ethics and law and understanding them. There are some things that you're legally obligated to do, legally obligated not to do. You don't want to break the law. But ethics is different because ethics sometimes are not clear cut. Ethics would be simple if some things were always right and always wrong. But that's not always the case. You try to list things. What's something that's always wrong? You think, well, killing a person. Well, in wartime, we do that to protect things. Maybe murder is always wrong, because that's the killing of an innocent person, maybe. Is lying wrong? Well, it kind of depends, right? We've all told white lies in order to not hurt somebody's feeling. You know, does this haircut look good? No, it looks awful. You know, we don't do those kinds of things. So not to belittle ethics, but it's not always as easy as it sounds. So I remember when this case hit, I probably was a little internally, it didn't hurt anybody. I didn't go on social media and post about it. I was probably a little self-righteous about this. Your chapter starts off talking about the case of Brian Williams of NBC News. He was a big deal. And he started telling a story about something that he was involved in Iraq. And it seems like the very first time he told the story, when he reported it, it was accurate. But over time, he would go on, he was kind of a celebrity journalist. He would go on talk shows and he'd tell the story. And over time, the story changed and morphed and became something different. The primary difference is when he was a reporter, I believe it was in Iraq, there was a helicopter of American servicemen that was fired upon and had to get to the ground. And they were in quite a bit of danger. And I believe that Brian Williams' helicopter was like 60 minutes away. And they were told, you need to land. And so they landed safely, so they didn't fly into that zone. And as he told the story, he talked about what it was like to be fired upon. You know, it just kind of makes you wince because he really wasn't fired upon. And he was pretty much, I wouldn't say brutalized, that's probably too strong a word, but a lot of people really took exception, particularly the servicemen that were in the helicopter that he was not in, that was fired upon. Stars and Stripes newspaper did a story and said, was, you know, Brian Williams in this helicopter? And they all said no. So he came out and he said, well, I misremembered. And I do think that's bad, and what happened should have happened. He ended up stepping down and he was off the air for a while. He's now back with NBC News, and he's on late at night, so he's no longer their big anchor, their big star, but he's back on the air. I'm kind of a little more empathetic position today about that. I think it was wrong what he did, but I do know how our memories work. And I'm not trying to cut him slack, it's not that. I'm just also not trying to burn him at the stake like a lot of other people. I think the fact he had to step down, apparently there was maybe more than one story that he exaggerated. But haven't we all exaggerated the story? So I think the problem is you can't, as a news person, exaggerate a story of your own glory and then kind of get away with it. But I understand how it happens a little bit. My brother and I were telling a story at a family gathering about something that happened on a July 4th. We were telling the same story, and at the end of the story, my version has a firecracker exploding in my hand. I was okay, just it hurt. And his version had it exploding in his hand. And it's just like one of us is misremembering. The difference is that's just a family story versus a national news story that you're misremembering, and you have to get those things straight. So journalists are held, particularly somebody of Brian Williams' stature. I mean, he kind of replaced Tom Brokaw. You're held to a higher standard than when you're just kind of telling the story about your family. Not that this matters, but I think my brother and I merged two stories because I know that happened to me because it hurt for like a week. And he wouldn't say if it didn't happen to him. So I think we're remembering maybe more than one story is what happened. But journalists can't misremember in the public eye about their stories. And so that made all of us look a little bit bad. Any of you guys remember that? It's been a few years. Okay, that's all right. It is the whole kind of scenarios in your textbook if you want to read about it. So ethics, on one level, depending upon my mood, I'll say ethics are simple. Do what you know is right. Ethics are difficult because you don't always know what that is. One thing I tell journalists when I'm teaching news writing, or PR people when I'm teaching any public relations class, you kind of already know what the right thing is to do. And so if your gut tells you something and somebody else tells you something else, always go with your gut. Because if it feels wrong to you, even if there's not a code of ethics for it, even if nobody agrees, if it feels wrong to you, it is wrong, at least for you. So I always have kind of the gut rule, go follow your gut. Several media organizations, whether they're in advertising, PR, journalism, TV, film, they have a kind of code of ethics. Some of them have multiple ones. And one of the first ones was developed in the 1920s to try to give a sense of professionalism to their fields. And some people think, hey, there's a code of ethics, so there's the answer to everything. Now, the code of ethics outlines broad principles, but sometimes you don't know what to do in the moment. Only one time that I remember in my career was I asked to do something a little bit outside my realm of what I thought was right. And I was in graduate school and I was single and I had no dependents, and it was a part-time job because I was in graduate school. I won't go into the ins and outs. But I was asked to do something really to change the nuance of something I'd written, to kind of, not whitewash, but sort of whitewash what I had written. And it was for the news. And I just couldn't do it, so I refused. And a few weeks later, that led me to resign and go get a part-time job trying to sell insurance to people. I was one of those annoying people who called you during dinner and said, can we give you a quote about insurance? I don't say that but to brag. When you're 20-something years old, I mean, no offense to the people in this room, quitting your job is not as difficult as when you're 55 and can't find one and have a whole family that you're supporting. So in a sense, I'm not ever saying sell your ethics out, but ethics gets difficult at certain stages if you really feel like you have to quit your job. And I'm not saying not, but it, you know, it'd be much easier for me today to quit a job over ethics than it was 30 years ago. But you sometimes will encounter moral conflicts. What is morally right? What is morally wrong? There's an interesting column in your textbook about the wrong-headed rape stigma. And there was a particular editor who published not only the person accused of rape, but the rape victims' names in the stories. And so this was very, very controversial. Most people in the news business do not identify rape victims because of the stigma of rape. But this person said, you know, out of a sense of fairness, you have to name both. And so he said that there's a wrong-headed rape stigma. Well, the truth is the stigma is real, but does he have a point? Not all victims that come forward are telling the truth, although more victims would come forward if there wasn't a stigma. So that was just an interesting box I call your attention to. What do you guys think? Do you think if the person accused of rape is being named, that the person who alleges that she was raped or he was raped should be named too? What do you think? Yeah, the typical journalistic ethics is, no, you don't name the victims here in these cases. I would say too that if for some reason somebody is found to be wrongly accused of the crime, then you make a big deal over the fact the person was innocent as a way of trying to clear their name. Well, early in the chapter, it does talk about different duties. First and foremost, you do have a duty to yourself in ethics, no matter what your profession. This is true to media ethics, because when all is said and done, you know, when you're getting ready to leave this earth, you know, many, many, many years from now, the only thing you really have is your good name, your reputation, who you are. And so you have a duty to do the right thing for yourself. Don't ever give that up for somebody else or for some other reason. You do have a great duty to your audience. That was really the thing that Brian Williams, one of the worst things he did was he misled his audience about the fact he was really in peril when he really wasn't. And I have to admit, that seems a little harder to misremember. I think I would know if somebody was shooting a gun at me. But so you have a duty to the audience to get your facts straight. You have a duty to your employer. You want to tell your newspaper the truth. You want to tell your TV station the truth, your PR firm, your profession. Every time somebody does something unethical and it makes the news, it hurts the profession. That's one of the reasons why people don't trust the media today, is of high profile people who've done unethical things. And of course, the mass media operating within society, there's a duty to society that's very similar to the duty that you find to the audience. So the media makes a lot of commitments to the public about content delivery, what they're going to bring to you. And the audience has expectations that when we say things, it should be true. Although today I think people view the media very skeptically. I don't think that's wrong. I think you should always be skeptical about what you hear. If you hear something interesting, go find 2 or 3 other sources to see if it's actually true. But the audience today has low expectations of the media, and in too many cases, we're not meeting it. I'm still very proud of the profession, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But audience expectations are low. I'd like to raise them. Okay, there's a whole lot of philosophy in this chapter. The golden mean is, sounds very simple. It's a philosophy that you kind of avoid extremes on either side. You kind of try to do things in the middle, and you try to be kind of, you know, in the reasonable middle of things versus, you know, this extreme and that extreme. And the problem is that's not always easy to apply, like everything else. The reciprocity principle, that kind of says, you know, treat others as you want to be treated. So there's a reciprocity to it. I'm gonna treat you guys the way I would want to be treated if I were a student in this class. And so I'm going to try to treat you well, hoping that then you'll treat me well. You'll treat me with respect. So that works in the media business. What does something that's utilitarian mean? Anybody know? The principle of utility. Or it's Thursday afternoon. We don't know, right? So that's okay. It kind of means practicality. Something that has utility is something that's kind of practical. So utilitarian ethics are sort of ethics that look at the practical nature of things. Very similar to pragmatic ethics. What's pragmatic? And then egalitarian, what is best for the most number of people. Social responsibility is the notion that we have a responsibility to one another and to society, and that we need to treat one another well. So these are some different moral principles that are outlined pretty thoroughly in your textbook. There's some other kind of ethics that kind of view the process of getting to the decision versus the outcome of the decision. Again, when you print off your study guides, you'll focus on what's on the study guide. This stuff's kind of interesting, but if there's one of these, I don't remember what's on the study guide standing here before you, but focus on the study guide because this is a whole lot of stuff. I'm not going to even talk about all of them. Divine command theory is kind of what it sounds like, the notion that you do a certain thing because you have a certain relationship to a divine being, that you believe in a God, you believe in a superior being, and as a result, you do what you think that being wants you to do. Secular command theory is kind of that without a God in it. So it is doing sort of secularly what you think is right by human standards, but you're not doing what you think is right by God's standards. So there's kind of a secular, what do humans think is right. Libertarian theory is kind of laissez-faire. It's what it sounds like. It's more about kind of freedom of thought and that kind of thing. Categorical imperative is what it sounds like. It is sort of like, this is the way it is. It's categorical. And so those are very different approaches to ethics. And these can be helpful to read, but I mean, the bottom line is, I think your code of ethics and professions and your own sense of professionalism help you far more. I think we're just going to skip over the rest of those. I don't want to go too in depth to these. Stick to whatever's on the study guide for those. Now, situational ethics are something we've all heard about. The ethics depends upon the situation. Sometimes that can be very helpful, but sometimes that's a little bit scary too, because I do like to think, and I don't think I'm the only one, that there are some absolutes in this world that aren't changed by situation. But situational ethics says that depending upon what's before you in kind of an ad hoc way, you decide to do whatever you do based on the situation itself. There was a guy named Potter that came up with this system of determining ethical choices based on a quadrant of boxes, okay? And one box had an S on it, that's the situation you're in. Another has values, so you're in this particular situation, but this is your values, your value system. Then there's principles, and then there's loyalties. And so you make a decision on ethical situation based on your competing loyalties and values and principles and what the situation is. So the Potter's box looks like something like this. Situation plus values plus principles plus loyalties. That's all well and good. The problem is it's hard to really, you still have to wade through all those on your own. You have to figure out the situation, your values, who you're loyalty to. And you'll have competing loyalties, perhaps. And so you also sometimes in ethical scenarios find yourself in legal trouble. Have any of you guys seen the movie The Post? Do you guys have Amazon Prime? I really recommend you watch The Post. That is a, wish we had time to watch it in class, but we don't. That's with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. And it is the story about the Washington Post when Katharine Graham became its publisher. She was one of the first women publishers in America of such a prestigious paper. It was the 1970s. And the Post wasn't what it was today. And it has to do with the Pentagon Papers case. The Washington Post got leaked to them classified documents stating that the American presidents during the Vietnam War lied to Americans about why we were in the war and why we were still in the war, and the war was still going on. The person who leaked it was a man named Daniel Ellsberg. He did it out of sense of loyalty. It was treason what he did, but he did it because he thought Americans needed to know and maybe he could end the war. So he leaked them first to the New York Times, and then the Nixon White House got an injunction on the Times to print, and then he leaked the papers to the Post, who was going to print. And a Supreme Court case came up where Nixon said, this is a matter of national security, and the Supreme Court said, let the presses roll. And it is it's historically pretty accurate. It's an important ethical dilemma throughout the whole movie, but it's also just a great movie because it's got good actors and it was produced well. And so I strongly recommend The Post because it talks about a lot of these ethical issues that become legal issues. At the time that Katharine Graham decided to print the Pentagon Papers, she wasn't sure or not if that meant she would be committing treason and have to go to jail. She thought it served a greater good that the public needed to know. So she made the decision to publish, but she very much could have gone to jail. Not only that, they were taking the Post public. They were making it a public company, and they were in the middle of that when this happened. She could have potentially ruined the financial future of the Post by making a courageous ethical decision. So I love that movie. I've seen it like 4 times. And I know that's kind of because this is my area, but I think you'll enjoy it if you're looking for something to watch over the break. So ethics, law, and practicality. Well, they are very different things, obviously. Law is something that if you do, you get punished. Ethics, sometimes you can do something unethical, but it's not illegal and you're not going to be thrown in jail for. If you lie to your editor, you're probably not going to get thrown in jail, but you've done something wrong. So that's kind of the different distinctions. There are obviously some things that are accepted practices and not accepted practices within these realms. And, I suggest that you try to do everything ethical and legal. But when there's a crossover, if you break, like did Katharine break the law? Kind of depends. She ended up not getting in trouble. The Supreme Court ended up siding with her. But what if they hadn't? Would she have gone to jail? We talked on Tuesday about Janet Cook. She was the lady who made up the story about Jimmy's World, and I forgot to post that. I'm gonna make a note to post that. Some of you may enjoy reading it. It is a great story, and once you read it, you're gonna wanna go rescue Jimmy, and that's what got her in trouble, because she had made him up. Remember, we talked about that. So one of the terrible things in journalism that you can never do is misrepresent things to the public. If you do, then you've failed to do your duty to yourself. You failed to do your duty to your audience, to your publisher, to your society, to your profession. Staging news is something that when there's actually no news, you try to create news as if it occurred. And that can be very misleading depending upon what it is. And you want to be very careful about that. Recreating things also can be problematic. Throughout the years, historically, ethics on this has changed. If any of you have ever seen the great photographs by Matthew Brady on the Civil War, there's really good photographs there. There's one photograph, I can't remember what it depicts, but it depicts a soldier in one way. And when they found that soldier, they actually repositioned his body to make the picture better. And in the 1860s, that was perfectly fine. Today, if you're taking a news photo and you reposition everything first, that's considered unethical because that's not what you found, that's what you created. So recreations of news are considered unethical. Selective editing, that's when you edit certain things for an effect, but not other things. And editors edit things for impact all the time, but you need to do so with a sense of fairness, a sense of balance, a sense of what the story's about. If you leave something out just because you're hiding something, that's unethical. And then fictional methods would be another example of what Janet Cook did. Again, I think her story would have been perfectly fine if at the top of the story it said, editor's note, this article is a composite of the people Janet Cook met while researching this story. She could get no one to go on the record, so she has created a composite character to tell their story. Then you're telling your audience that Jimmy's a fictional character. That's perfectly legit. It also wouldn't have been as powerful. But I mean, you go with the less powerful story, you go with the legit story. So it's really difficult sometimes to know what to do ethically. Have any of you, maybe not in news, maybe experienced anything in any of your jobs? And we're not asking because we're recording here, so we're not asking about names of the jobs or names of people. But if you had to make an ethical decision that was hard in any of your internships or anything you've done for work or maybe even school, again, leave out specifics. I don't want to identify people. Anything? You will when you, at some point, you'll encounter something. One of the things I like to do when I teach ethics is tell people, okay, here's the code of ethics for Society of Professional Journalists. Here's a code of ethics for Public Relations Society of America. Here's a code of ethics for Broadcast BEA, the Broadcast Association. But what's your personal code of ethics? Do you have one? What is it? Can you articulate it? You should have a code of ethics by which people know who you are. I wasn't the kind of reporter that did a lot of reporting with anonymous sources, because you always try to get people on the record. And I didn't, it's not that my reporting didn't matter, but I wasn't an investigative journalist trying to dig out a lot. I reported on meetings and did feature stories and that kind of thing. But But I did do one story with an anonymous source. And my editor, or I guess actually my publisher, knew the name of the person, but nobody else knew. Because this day and age, because of Janet Cook, we have to reveal often who our sources are to our publisher. And so the story went out. It wasn't anything that of national import or anything like that, but it was about a dispute between two companies. I don't remember their names today because that was a long time ago. And if I told you their names, you wouldn't remember them. I could look them up. And both companies had signed some kind of non-disclosure thing that said they wouldn't talk about the other when this news happened. But one person talked to me anonymously. So when it came out, there were people who said, she just made it up. She just made it up. To which I was very pleased. My publisher and several other people who knew me said, Pam Perry would never do that. I hadn't. It was a real story. The person who had been anonymous actually called me and said, you cannot tell anybody. And I said, I haven't. I said, I told my publisher, but we've not told anybody else. And nobody ever found out who it was. It wasn't that big a deal, and everything kind of went back to normal. The only reason I tell you that story is I can't tell you how much that meant to me. That it was a different day. You wonder if publishers would stand by you today. But I was known enough within this community of people that people knew, and I have people like that I can count on. That if I have a friend, if she tells me that Martians landed on the quad, at least I know something happened because she doesn't, she tells the truth. Media ethics and moral principles are a part of the process. The process is important, but it's not as important as the outcome. What did you decide to do and what was the result? So kind of like in this case, the ends do matter. How you process it, I don't care that much about. The Potter's Box is hopefully something you hadn't heard about before. And then ethics, law, and practicality. Try to always do what's legal and what's ethical and be pragmatic about it. If you do something as monumental as commit treason, better make sure there's a war, something really important, That's why there's movies made about those people. They don't happen very often. I never faced any great dilemma like that. Any questions about any of that? Okay, make sure, that you do your form for the week. You've done 16, 17, and whatever, and I will send you a Zoom link for Tuesday's class. I'm gonna let folks at home go and they'll come clean your seats. I know we're letting you out a little bit early, but I think that's okay. We covered that class pretty well, that chapter pretty well. Let me stop the recording here.
I came in a little late. My computer was acting up.
Okay, thanks, Tanner. I'll put you down on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else come in after we started? Let me just look through the book here real quick. Okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna close off the recording and